Hello. In this clip from our Justia webinar, AI, Legal Developments, Risks, and Benefits, Sarah Anderson discusses the pros and cons of working with artificial intelligence. If you want to see more Justia videos on law practice and legal marketing, be sure to subscribe to our channel.
All right. One of the things I wanted to convey in this presentation is that, there's the yin and the yang to artificial intelligence. There's amazing benefits to using artificial intelligence, especially in the medical sector, but there's also substantial risk with using artificial intelligence, specifically from a national security sector that we're going to get into now, or that we're going to get into, in this presentation. But let's talk about the benefits of it. I would say the most benefits I've seen in terms of artificial intelligence are fraud detection in a lot of different ways, although that tends to get tricky in the case law, and you'll see why later here, but also in the medical arena. It's interesting. I don't know if anyone saw this on Netflix, but there was a mini series called The Pharmacist, and it was based off of a gentleman who ran a small pharmacy in New Orleans, Louisiana, and his son was murdered in the Ninth Ward as a result of a drug deal or something like that. Well, before I saw that, and I promise there's a point, this is not just Sarah's review of pop culture, but before I saw that, I really was never sure what a pharmacist did. I knew they went to school for 6 years and I knew they had to do a lot of chemistry, but I was like, how difficult is it to count to 30 pills? I don't understand, right? Or I figured, okay, they just got to determine based on your weight, how much pain medication you could take. But other than that, I didn't know. But pharmacists actually have a really difficult job in the sense that they have to look at your complete medical history as available to them, the drugs that you're on, and make sure that they are able to identify any problems or conflicts between the medication that would cause, serious or minor complications to you, warn you of what those are, potentially have you sign a waiver, or go back to the doctor and say, hey, doc, I don't know if you knew this, but they're also on this medication, or to identify based on the medication what might be coming up, right? If, all of a sudden your doctor puts in, stock order, or your doctor starts scheduling you for pre-op surgery and they give you a sedative for a surgery, the doctor notices you're also on a blood thinner, right? They may say, hey, what is the sedative for? And they say, oh, I've got a surgery coming up. Well, you don't want to be on a blood thinner for a surgery, right? You're going to bleed out on the table. So that's their job. Well, one of the ways that artificial intelligence is helping the medical sector is it's doing a lot of that work for the pharmacist up front. That's not to say the pharmacist isn't needed, but they are performing that where they do a lot of medication management. In other words, they take a look at the patient's entire profile and they do, through keyword searches and obviously a great algorithm and verifiable peer-reviewed content, just like that Galbert test, they look to see if there's going to be a conflict between those medications, and they produce a list of red flags for the pharmacist that he or she can then eyeball and say, okay, yes, this is a potential red flag, but I'm not worried about this red flag because of X. Or, I'm worried about these two options. These are very minor. I can warn the patient, or this one needs to go back to the doctor for further analysis. In other words, it helps the pharmacist do that while they're trying to move things along. And I think that sort of thing is exceedingly helpful. I do know that I have heard from pharmacists that they do create a lot of false red flags, but I'd much rather have a false red flag than die. They're also doing the same thing for radiology. So they're using artificial intelligence to review radio scans for lung cancer, breast cancer, any type of analysis of, a MRI as well, to determine the presence of any type of diseases. I've also spoke to radiologists who said they see a lot of false positives that it really takes the human eye to validate. But she, and this particular radiologist was a female. She did say that it was nice in the sense that she had a greater confidence, kind of going through that. Not only had she checked it with her, naked eye, but she's also had a machine check it, which, produced a lot of false positives, but she was at least able to go back and negate those for one categorized reason or another. So that, I think, is a great use of artificial intelligence. Another one is predictive blood flow. So this is being used with, people who are at risk of stroke or heart disease. And then it's also being used for surgical patients to determine where the blood's going to go based on the patient's history, if they're going to be operating in an area that has a lot of veins or different connections, to make sure they minimize the risk of the patient bleeding out, or they're aware of where the potential areas of concern could be. So these are, two amazing uses. Now, for anyone who's curious, the Department of Health and Human Services, which produces Center for Medicaid and Medicare Services, in other words, sort of our federal agency for healthcare oversight, they have started saying in some very hard to find materials that they're going to start kind of regulating the use of artificial intelligence in different areas of medicine. One of them would be signs of a stroke, signs of eye cancer, using it for wrist fractures and sleep issues, I think were some of the other ones. But the last time I saw this was in 2021. I have not done a deep dive this calendar year yet. But if you do have a client that is in this area, it may be worth a dive because, like I said, DHS is starting to put its foot in to say, hey, we might want to regulate this, and it could be outside the purview of other regulatory agencies. So it could be worth your knowledge, especially if they plan on marketing this tool to any hospital that is receiving Medicare funds. All right. Next one I told you, this is the yang on this, right, is that it's a really dangerous tool from a national security perspective. I'm going to let you kind of read this on the screen. But I want you to think about the concept of deep fakes, right? So I'm sure a lot of people have seen this, deep fake advertising, fake, things on, there's a big one going around for about a year about different cars and crash tests. And it was clearly artificial intelligence pretending that certain car models were better than others. And it was just deep fake technology. Well, what if you applied that same deep fake technology to an ongoing international crisis? Right now, obviously, we've got the Russia-Ukraine war. There's a concern that Iran is going to invade Israel. And what if to spark one side jumping over, creating a false start or another, or to influence negotiations, people put out deep fakes about leaders in these particularly tenuous situations saying things that maybe they didn't say. So here's as a result, and with natural language models, they can get Putin and his voice to say something that would match what we would normally expect to hear if you've ever heard audio from him in his accent in, fluent Russian and presented to the public. And it's extremely, extremely difficult to identify these deepfakes. And when you have news organizations competing to release information before another, they're not always going to do, the analysis on the images and where it came from to make sure that it's available before they kind of blast it out to the public. So like I said, this is a danger to national security. Another one that I'd like to share is, having been deployed overseas before, I can tell you that a lot of military forces overseas rely on satellite imagery. That's no secret, right? And they analyze that satellite imagery for different purposes, right? That's how we know what goes on with China and the South China Seas, right? In terms of the escalating tensions with Taiwan, is we use satellite imagery to monitor their activity. It's not like we're calling every day and asking, hey, what you doing today, right? Well, what if someone started, interfering with the satellite feed and replacing the data that the satellite or the data stores that the satellite images, the real ones, feed into with false images? And we would see false examples of, things happening or not happening, right? And that's what the Center for Strategic Studies was talking about with the Cuban Missile Crisis. Another example would be, instead of, let's say there was a big movement by a nation hostile to the U.S., moving a lot of supplies and materials into a particular spot, right? Because they're getting ready to build something that would attract our interest. What if they replace that with images of trucks moving dirt, or images of just school buses, or images of something benign, so it didn't raise our suspicions? So it can go both ways. It can escalate tensions by causing, creating images or activity or images or analysis of things that aren't actually happening, or it can also de-escalate things and hide things that are in fact happening. So this is sort of the yin to the yang. And also, obviously, there's a danger to commerce. I gave you guys that banking industry one, but I will tell you it has really impacted phishing attacks. It's not just the Prince of Nigeria. I found this image online and I thought it was amazing. I get a lot of cases, it's like buzz floating through my office. My apologies. I get a lot of cases that deal with business email compromise, where essentially one party their email account is compromised in one way or another, right? And as a result, a vendor either goes to pay them and accidentally wires the money someplace else, or they go to pay a vendor and they accidentally wire the money someplace else due to an email that came in telling them to change payment. Well, it used to be these were really easy to spot, and some are, right? Some are easy to spot. If you see an email asking for immediate payment on one issue or another, right, and it's a sense of urgency, and that client or vendor doesn't normally do that, huge red flag. If you see something that what if they're a very loquacious individual like myself in their emails, and they're used to sending multi-paragraph and they write thanks at the end of every email, or they write very truly yours or something like that, or their phone numbers usually at the bottom of their email. But the emails you're getting requesting an urgency for payment don't have their phone number on there, huge red flag, or are different than what you're used to receiving from them, or instead of emailing you about these things, they email your coworker, and when normally you're their point of contact. Those are all huge red flags. Well, now some of those are still there, right? They usually remove the phone number or try not to go to someone, super familiar with them, but they will use large language models to go ahead and produce that content, or they'll find ways that images look very similar. If you look at the fake and the real difference in the spam email, you will see that instead of spelling Microsoft with an M, they spelled it with an R and an N, which quickly, when you look at it together, look how similar that looks. And because these images of the logo for Outlook are all over the internet, and we get a lot of these images, and then they're also on the Microsoft help websites, it's very easy for someone to take this text and put it in. Honestly, I could have made this with Canva myself if you get to know the tool. It's not very difficult. But the downside of the benefits of these tools, again, is that they can spread business email, compromise, phishing links, or disguise a previous email, or change the domain name from a spoofed email and send it out and make it look so real and copy your dialect. So if you're a Southerner, we say y'all, right? We say thanks to just about everything. Someone could slap you in the face and you'd be like, oh, bless your heart, or thank you, right? And put that in the emails to match, the dialect that you come from. So this is just another way that things could be used against us, which is what makes AI slightly dangerous.
Thanks for watching. We hope you enjoyed this video, and if you did enjoy it, please hit the like button and subscribe to our channel for more videos on law practice and legal marketing. See you in our next clip.